Next presentation is David Riekie. He's Managing Director of Adavale Resources, and he's going to talk to you about hunting for elephants in Tanzania and their nickel elephants. So please welcome David.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for taking the time out of your busy day to hear a little bit more about Adavale Resources. As you can see from that introduction, we go forward to my slide. I'm just giving Karen another rev. We are chasing nickel elephants, sulfide nickel elephants actually, the different tribe of elephants in Tanzania. You want to find out where you should go. You actually have a look at those people that are around you and have had massive discoveries. So if you want to find something large, you're going to go to that terrain. Just stopping on the disclaimer, as you can see with the disclosures we've got there with the references, we've had a busy 12 months. And that's really featuring in the nickel targets we originally identified, the programs that took us to that point where we deployed magnetics as well as EM, and now moving into this very important stage, which is the drilling aspect. A little bit of background, we actually situated very strategically in this area called the East African Nickel Belt. We have a dominant position there. This extends all the way up to Uganda and down through into Burundi. And our portfolio is 100% owned with the exception of Lahuma, which is a small area of about 100 square kilometres that we're farming into. We've already achieved 65%, we're moving to 80%, and we have an option to take it to 100%. We need to sort of paddle our own canoe and find our own deposits. We're going to be focusing on the area that has actually demonstrated that, which is Kabanga, but also featuring that is this deposit in this area called Lahuma. Yet to be a deposit, but it's actually offering us some real exploration potential. The other really important point to feature in the opening is the fact that we've intersected 5 nickel sulfide intersections in all the first 5 holes that we've drilled. Now, I've never had that level of success with other things I've been drilling, and I think it's a feature of the fact that we've taken a while to get to this point, but we are now delivering on that expectation. And we are demonstrating that with a pretty significant outcome. And there's a little bit of arm waving going on here, but we've hit 350 metres of a 2,000 metre program, which is nickel sulfide rich. It's disseminated, massive and semi-massive. And that feature of success is really in and around Lahuma Central. As you can see, we've got not only massive sulfides, semi-massive and blebby sulfides over those 5 holes. The first hole, which I'll call a rediscovery hole, because we really anticipated hitting nickel sulfides, we weren't disappointed. We skimmed the top of what we think is an iceberg in the second hole, and we've marched forward with a lot more conviction and a lot more certainty that the other holes are starting to deliver in on our expectation. The exciting bit at this point in time, those assays are going to be coming out shortly with holes 3 and 4, but very critically, this hole number 5 has been a bit of a monster. And the monster is actually in the feature. We've got disseminated and blebby sulfides over about 300 metres. And what's really not featuring in this narrative at this point in time, but I'm sharing with you today, is we're also seeing this high MgO reading. Now, you've got to have this primitive ultramafic rock to be able to get these higher grade nickel occurrences in the sulfide that you are seeing. More on that when our assays come out. It's a little bit dangerous to rely upon portable XRF, but they are a very good field tool, and we are seeing a lot of stuff we like in those samplings. As you can see, we're actually migrating through a process here where we've gone reasonably shallow, a couple of 100 metres, down to about 400 metres. Now, what that's demonstrating in the next slide is the fact that we're getting a thickening of the mineralisation further to the southwest. Now, this is a feature of some of these nickel sulfides. But what we're going to be encountering is we're going to have to drill deeper. But that's okay, because the grade is actually going to, I think, support that, because what we're seeing in the portable XRF is suggesting that that's what's happening. And with the fact that we've got this signature MgO. We've also got some copper and some cobalt that's featuring in our assays at this point in time. And why I'm referencing that is that Kabanga also has these features. We've tested for PGs, but they don't seem to hold the same sort of grade that we would have expected. Now, that's not a bad thing. It's just that there is PGE in this system, but more particularly, we're chasing the nickel. This is a very busy slide, apologies, but it actually has a lot of really rich information that I want to dive into and just share a little bit on it. We've actually mapped out these trends over the course of 5 months and before that. We've got this ground holding in May, but we've done a lot of work around Lahuma Central, and we saw this as a very important feature of actually preparing for what we are now doing. As soon as we've got the ground, we've run AMT over it. We've actually utilised EM surveys. We've done gravity, and we've done an assessment of the drilling that's been taking place here. So we've got some long sections which I'll share with you in a moment, but we've also been tracing other occurrences that have been drilled by the big guys, Anglo and BHP, early on in the piece. Now, because we don't have the validation and the integrity that goes with that information, we've been quite discerning. We wanted to drill our own holes, understand what's going on, and more particularly understanding the geology. So the long section we've got here, it shows that we've got a system that was shallowing probably to the north, but we've got, importantly, this really, really nice swell that's happening around and to the southwest. So we will drill further to the southwest. We're assessing our situation now. What we want to try and do is preserve our cash, because it's always a feature of a junior. We are using downhole EM as a survey tool. We are applying EM, ground EM over the ground, getting a correlation so we do not have to drill multiple holes over large extents. We're seeing this mineralised body could actually extend over about 1.5 kilometres. We don't want to drill 10 holes when we really only need to drill 1 or 2 to get the same measure of certainty around it. So we're trying to be quite discerning with the cash that we've got. We see this as an extension of a trend. This trend goes over about 10 kilometres. Now that's kind of exciting when you look at what our neighbour has by way of 3 to 4 kilometres hosting these sort of massive bodies. So we think we've got some rich pickings within this. We've actually done some preliminary drilling at Lahuma Central. HEM2 has been a little bit of a disappointment, I must admit. We thought we'd see more there, but there is nickel sulfides in that system, and massive sulfides do not appear at this point in time in the core. But we're encouraged with what we've got. We'll need to do more work on that. Unfortunately, the smearing on there on the slide, we've actually got another couple of areas that we're going to be focusing on, which is this northeast area. My apologies. This area here. We know it's mineralised, but we don't necessarily have to drill it right now. We know it's deeper. Again, we're looking and chasing this trend over this 10 Ks. HEM4 is going to be the feature of our work over the next 6 to 8 weeks. And HEM4 is actually demonstrating some really nice coincident EM and gravity anomalies. And the reason why we'd like to do that is because we focus so heavily on Lahuma Central, we want people to recognise that we've got a very rich portfolio. When we first looked at this, there were 32 anomalies. We've done HEM over basically 18 of them, and we've only focused on a couple of areas. So we want to make sure that people think we're not myopic and we're not just looking at one area, but we're going to be able to replicate this and demonstrate it in other areas. So we've got quite high expectation that HEM4 is going to come in with some of the goods. The reason why we're so confident about that, because we've been able to apply the same sort of knowledge that we've accumulated at Lahuma Central and deploying it in another area. Again, we've used soils, airborne. We're doing some RC drilling in the first instance to actually reflect the fact we're hitting the right rock types before we do the more expensive diamond drilling. This RC program will be around about 1,000 metres. It'll drill around about 150 metres, but it'll give us some rich information. The important thing is that we're also hitting those areas that have actually demonstrated the highest nickel and copper in our soils over the entire area. So we're really quite enthused with what's happening there. The next steps, we're getting assays done. We're doing further diamond drilling around Lahuma Central. We've got downhole EM as a feature of the work that we're doing, and we're looking to actually migrate down to these other areas. So there's assays and there's drilling outcomes that are coming. It's a very attractive destination. Africa, and particularly Tanzania, is becoming a focal point for places like the US to come back in and saying, we want your nickel, please go hard. And it's more reflected in the fact that our neighbour is listed on the New York Stock Exchange and commands a value of about $1.5 billion. I'm not here to talk about them, but the fact that we've got eyes on the prize in Tanzania as a nickel destination is critically important for us. And as a junior, we'll use that leverage. Thank you very much. Infrastructure, power, and those other aspects that weren't necessarily a feature of an early term explorer are now going to be a feature of what we want. If we find something, we'll need to have that level of opportunity to tap into these sorts of infrastructure projects that are marching ahead. Now this is the feature of that a refinery is likely to be built in country, which will be done by BHP, and that's where we'll be putting our ore once we've become a mine. Expectations are we first need to get an exploration target and a resource, but certainly we need to have a focus, we need to have a goal. That's our goal. I'll jump quickly, if I can, to uranium. Now, we've actually had this ground for quite some time, and it hasn't really been a value proposition for us yet. We know that it commands uranium in the system, and we've had some early term successes with soils and gamma that demonstrate it does actually hold 350 plus ppm, and in some isolated pockets, much, much, much higher. The drilling program we undertook really wasn't a success. You know, we actually didn't find that the channels that we found, they were too shallow. They didn't command the grade that we thought it would. However, every drilling program is going to give you rich information, so we need to go back and reflect on where we should have focused, which is probably closer to the source. Now, the source is basically down around here, and that source is the Flinders Ranges. We know it commands uranium because there are features around it and mines that have been developed on the eastern wash and on the western wash, and we're to the north. So we've strategically pegged this ground here, and we will see that that will be featuring in future studies, as well as this area up here, which is closer to the source at the Flinders Ranges. Our market cap is around about $10 million. We show $1 million by way of cash at 30 June. That's been supplemented with $3.3 million that has been raised by way of placement and rights issue. And we see that we're well funded to actually move things forward for the program that we see will take us to the next 9 months. Essentially, we've got an exposure to the critical metals, not only nickel, but uranium. We've also demonstrated that we are now finding the nickel sulfide that we've been chasing. We've demonstrated those results, and we have a uranium bonus. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thanks, David. Questions? Questions?
Come on, throw a hard one.
I've got one.
Yes.
You talked about the majors drilling at Lahuma Central and the fact they walked away. Why did they walk away?
Unfortunately, there was a very sad event in our history. It was called Rwanda. You know, and that genocide that happened meant there were a lot of displaced people that came across the border and made their home in Tanzania, and they made their home at Lahuma, which is basically was a feature of a refugee camp. So unfortunately, a lot of the expectations that they would try and replicate something at Lahuma, Kabanga basically was open to them. Lahuma was not. Unfortunately, there was far too many people there for that value to be unlocked by way of drilling. So they've actually done some preliminary drilling, and I think that we've got the benefit of having this tested, but certainly there's a lot of potential that remains to be unlocked. So unfortunately, that sad event meant that the opportunity is now presented to us to go and find the nickel sulfides that we're now finding.
Thanks.
That's Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers.